me observe that we museum, and Jane at the back will probably speak up for the MIMSI as it was then. I can't remember what it's called now, but it was called MIMSI then. Museum Collection Management System, that's the point. And I think I'm right in saying the museum management system is exceptionally good, maybe not comprehensive, but very extensive in any case. But in many senses also a stock management system, a system designed to know where objects were, so that we didn't have too many location unknown objects, which anyone in a museum context will understand the subtlety of that meaning. So that was an audit tool, not a public access tool. It represented the accession books extremely well, and I seem to remember searching the examples which had been used. I can't remember what it was now, but something like you're searching for a sword, you know. Glasgow Museums has lots of swords by any standards. Some of the best swords in the world. You're not going to find any of them in the collection management system because they're foils and épées and claymores and every other variation of specialist term used. So that needs to be presented back to the public, and it needs to be the whole collection for reasons that Martin says. And it's access to the whole collection, not online access.
So just picking up on that point, so the way that we evolved developing the collections level descriptions was thinking about how best to divide up the collection. In some areas it was absolutely dead clear. Natural history has its own classification system already, so we didn't need to try too hard in that respect. We did subvert the system slightly by pulling forward things like birds and mammals above vertebrates and more technical terms, but essentially the structure was there already. Something like art, the most difficult conversations we had probably in the development of the whole Navigator surrounded trying to work out how we chunk up the art collection. Do you do it by school? Do you do it by geography? Do you do it by date? Mm-hmm. And actually, in the end, across the whole project, we came up with what now seems like a very logical solution, but wasn't entirely obvious at the time, was that it depended on the curatorial specialism. So it depended on the individual curator and the collection that they had responsibility for. So that determined the way that the collection was broken up, which also had the advantage that there was somebody actually physically responsible for writing that collection level description. So, I mean, we have something like 1,250 collection level descriptions in Collections Navigator altogether, as well as about 3,000 object level descriptions. So that's quite a lot of work there. Although, quoting Matthew, to write a collection level description takes, and I quote, almost no time at all.
I wanted to cheer when he said that. That's what I thought too.
William, would you like to...
That's why I proposed that 200 and only managed
do you want to give us an insight into how long it actually took?
Oh my goodness, I mean, it's almost a piece of string, is the honest truth. So some of them write themselves, you know. Some of them really do write themselves. It's a simple process, but Martin has neatly kind of sidestepped the issue of this polyhierarchical structure which we developed, which it's a polyhierarchical faceted classification for those of you who are really wanting to know that sort of thing. And any object can exist in more than one point in the hierarchy is the point, and any one object can be part of multiple collections. So the Jewish collection, for example, contains art associated with 20th century Judaism, for example. So anyway, that's beside the point. Rightly or wrongly, we made the assumption that the curatorial expertise would be available. It would be presumed, and the curators would be in a position to write those collection level descriptions. Now, one of the initiatives already mentioned again was the recognition scheme. Is that what it's called? The designation scheme. Anyway, we went through the process of breaking the collection down into components for the purpose of a submission to Museums and Galleries Scotland, for the purposes of getting the brass plaque, on the door. So we knew that was going to come, and we knew that was we could assert that as a certain level within the collection, and that was properly factored in. I think what we didn't quite anticipate was just the sheer amount of effort that would be involved in acquiring those collection level descriptions from any individual member of staff, and some of them would be very straightforward, and some of them would genuinely, and this isn't again meant in any disrespect to the curators involved, there were genuinely other significant, massive requirements on their shoulders. And implicitly here, for example, we were building the Riverside Museum at the time. We were moving everything out of storage at the time and building a new storage facility, and that meant the curatorial staff and running a public programme, and that meant the public, the curatorial resource which Martin led was actually very thinly stretched across those activities.
Yeah, indeed.
Shall I say something about technology for those of you interested?
Yes, go ahead.
Shall we do hands up?
Yeah. Shall I just say you can come back in a few minutes once I'm finished? So, some thoughts about technology. Now, we've already had mention of collection level. I'm glad that it's been well set up. We choose this collection level description approach, and actually, it's not been mentioned yet, but I'm pretty sure the UMIS stuff comes from the same place. We started by looking at a series of resources developed out of a project or a programme called the RSLP Research Support Libraries Programme, which in turn developed a series of tools for collection level description, which were hosted by UCall, no longer UCall of fond memory, who presented effectively a standard for collection level description, a metadata standard. And it mapped into Dublin Core, and it mapped into all those other different standards, and that means that you can do
all the
things
terms I couldn't remember.
Yeah. So that means you can do things like harvest it in OAI, or you can use your Z3950 target, or all those other things which you could do with it. We decided usefully, again, Jane Rathwaite in the back remembers some of this work, where there were functions within the existing collections management system to attach effectively collection groupings, and we use those collection groupings as a way of effectively doing the data management of the collection level descriptions. So they exist, and I'm pretty sure they still exist. I haven't gone back and checked, but they're probably still in that database as groups of the collection, and that means that data's still there. Whatever else happens online, there is a statement of what the collection was like. It's in a big Oracle database run for, I was going to say Glasgow City Council, that dates me, but run for the museums as part of their ongoing understanding of the collection. So that's partly kind of technical side of things, and then there's a kind of a query that you can run basically on demand, produce a little MySQL database, and that MySQL database then feeds the website, which is typical MySQL kind of driven content website. And what could possibly go wrong with that? I would observe, if I can, from two different angles here. Firstly, this is why people who work in the public sector are always very jealous of universities, and I'm sure there's reasons for it to go the other way too, but Glasgow City Council at the time had very strict expectations about stress testing online resources. Stress testing them, not actually doing any work strictly on accessibility, just making sure the server didn't break and making sure there was never a denial of service attack. So really thorough stress testing and load balancing servers had to be put in place. Or a museum's database with collection level descriptions in it, taking a hammer to crack a nut, because the expectations of Glasgow City Council and local government online service are for millions of users a day, and we would be lucky to have a few thousand users probably in a month or a year. Anyway, that's one observation. The second observation to make is an organisational one, which touches on the technology, takes us to a bit of organisational history. So this started, I think I'm right in saying, under what was it called? Culture and Leisure Services. And was finally delivered by what was then Culture and Sport Glasgow, now Glasgow Life. Is that right?
Yeah.
All of the tools and technology that we started with was licensed to Glasgow City Council, with no capacity for those licenses or those software or resources to be relicensed to a successor body of the City Council. So any procurement we did early on in the project had to be repeated. I'm just saying out loud, because I never got a chance to say these things out loud when I worked there. That was a pain in the backside. I'm sorry, don't report that. It meant that we came to a point where we owned the server but not the processor. That was the deal we did, because the license ran on the processor, and Glasgow City Council therefore retained ownership of the processor, but the rest of the services owned it. It's a kind of incredible and maddening kind of process to have to try and resolve, and certainly not one that was factored into the design of the project. Let me also observe, at the same point, Glasgow City Council was going through a process of outsourcing its services. And it chose a very good service provider to provide its IT support to it. Maybe I should explain that again. We were an outsourced service trying to deal with a service which had also itself been outsourced. So any requests, any development, any requests for changes had to go from my desk to the head of IT of the culture service, who then had to contact the city council, whose own IT contact person would then pass it on to the it's an outsourced development activity, and that, frankly, is just more than any sane person.
Especially with a risk-averse organisation.
Yeah.